welcome to the Last Fireflies podcast, in solidarity with all humans and non-humans dealing with climate chaos.
Hi everyone. Today we're talking about the future. It's gonna be me, Em, Annie, and Robbie. And if you're asking yourself, why are we talking about the future? Because the future makes you feel things, sometimes good, sometimes bad. Well, that's why we're talking about the future. And also because in episode 8 about the climate emergency, Robbie mentioned some reasons to have an investment in the future. Well, let's think about those reasons. One of them was children. So we're also going to talk about this one, but also about other reasons to just do things for the future. And what do we mean by the future? When you think about it in really, really broad terms, all animals have some sort of investment in the future, at least their future. And it's an animal characteristic to think forward so you can survive. We have examples of some crows who might have evidence of foresight, like use certain tools or prepare certain tools for further use. And we have, well, the fastest thing you can think of is squirrels hiding food. There are many examples that we can think of. And then when we think of the human species, people have been building things for a long time that are still there after they were dead, or that took a very, very long time to build. The first thing that comes to mind is the Sagrada Familia, a religious building. It's usually churches. But surely there are other things like infrastructure, right? Big infrastructure. People have been building these things and then they didn't see the end of it, but now we are experiencing it. So obviously we'll live in the future of all the people who came before us. So we're already in the future. And then we are the past of the people who will come after us. So I'm going towards also asking ourselves a little bit, what kind of ancestors are we going to be, as inspired by thinker Roman Krznaric? Is that how you pronounce his name? Does anybody know?
You pronounced it perfectly with Balkan English.
I will just go with this. I was quite inspired by his ideas and his talks on being a good ancestor. And obviously, many of them come also from indigenous cultures, right? And from different stories. And I want us to think a little bit about this. How do we conceive the future? And then do we ever imagine ourselves as ancestors? And what does it feel like to imagine yourself as an ancestor?
The first thing that popped into my mind, trivia of the day. When you spend time with me, you get trivia of the day. So trivia of the day, because you said about squirrels, I read that squirrels, as you said, they plan for the future. They hide nuts for winter, but they actually forget where they hide like 80% of the nuts. And the nuts that they forget basically lead to forest growth, reforestation and stuff. So they plan for the future and their plans don't go exactly according to the plan, but their actions lead to something great, which is forests growing. I don't know exactly what we can take from that, but I think it's an interesting trivia here.
Yeah, and actually when Em was saying what's the investment of animals in the future and thinking about the people, like you gave the example, Em, at the beginning about, I think, crows that are learning how to use tools in order to survive more or like to use that. But like we do the same. The only problem with the humans is that we really like build all the tools and all the ingenuity and all the devices and digital life in order to live longer, and that we are like really good at it. We really live way longer than our ancestors. But I think there is something unconstructive in the way that we do. We want to live longer no matter what. And I think that this no matter what, it's a really big issue of how we actually plan for the future. So there we can see that there is a lot of development of technology and tools to help us live for a longer time and be more maybe healthy for the time that we are living. So maybe it is a bit of an interest to have an investment in the future, but it's kind of like our own future, like these people that are now living. And maybe, of course, if some other generations will come, they will benefit out of it. But like we don't really think about what's the cost of the way that we are doing it. And many times the costs are, of course, using the resources of the planet in ways in which is not giving back to the earth in any way possible. And I feel like maybe this is a bit of a difference between us and the animals, or I'm not sure. I'm not really sure about all the investments in the future of the animals and if it's just like accidental or not. But like, even if it's accidental, as with the squirrel, as Robbie was saying, I'm thinking now that maybe it's because they're not accidentally so bad for the for the earth that they are living on, and we are accidentally, if not intentionally, very bad for our environment. Yeah.
That actually leads me to 2 points. So one of them, while you were speaking, Annie, I was thinking of a feminist thinker that I really like, Angela Balzano. She's from Italy, and she really wrote a lot about how can we make kin with other non-human beings and also just between ourselves across nations. She really wrote about how can we live and how can we reproduce without hurting the other, right? So exactly what you were saying. How can we have these good lives that are long lives that are not at the expense of other beings, other animals, other ecosystems, and other humans who are being exploited in various ways and in various places, and their ecosystems and habitats and homelands are being destroyed. So that's one thing. And the other thing about the squirrels, it's a really cute example, and I think it makes people sort of laugh and be like, but the squirrels, they are so silly. Like, maybe the squirrels are wise. Maybe the squirrels are like, this is how we're gonna get the forest for my baby squirrels. Maybe not. I don't know. But the point is that what kept many species alive for a long time was not destroying their environment in which they thrive, right? This is why they kept living, because they didn't trash everything. They were not like, this is my lake, I'm just gonna pollute all of it because I don't care what's gonna happen for the future fishes. They did not go like this. It's a really simple wisdom, but at the same time, we're not doing it. To just care for the places that sustain our lives. And that is how we would be caring about the future as well, and for the future generations, human and non-human.
The thought that popped into my mind as you were talking, if you consider squirrels putting away food for winter as planning for the future, having an investment in the future, then every living thing always plans for the future. Maybe we would be tempted to think of this as a truism. However, I think there's something very profound about capitalism. And of course, capitalism is produced by humans that take decisions, but ultimately we need to analyze also capitalism as a system, and the laws that explain the dynamics of the system. And I think it's very eye-opening maybe to actually realize that capitalism is not a system in which there is an investment in the future, because in capitalism, the only thing that is valued is extraction of value, the flow of value. And that means if you destroy the future in order to produce value, that's something good under capitalism. And that's what we see with fossil fuels, and that's what we see also with hyper exploitation of workers who die young and get sick. And that's what we see with all kinds of extraction that destroys the earth. And I think this is something very profound about capitalism, that it's not a system in which a planning or an investment in the future is something that is valued. It's something negative. If you put your money in something that will protect us in the future, that's something negative. You should put it into something that produces value, profit now. It almost plans for the elimination of the future in a way by focusing in the present. It wants to extend the present, what is in the present, to extend it infinitely. And that's why capitalism goes so well with the current form that the far right is taking worldwide. Because the far right is also in a form that is not really planning for the future. The far right doesn't really have a vision of utopia where they want to reach. They just have a plan for the present and want to project this present into the future, or just do not think about the future at all. It's kind of vague now, but it really resonated with me the way that Naomi Klein and Asa Trader described this as end times fascism. Like the current form of the far right globally is a death cult, not a project of world building. And I think that's why it goes so well hand in hand with capitalism. Neither of them have really an investment in the future.
And I think that besides the system in itself, capitalism and the need of perpetuating value extraction for it to create the world, no matter any future. I think this kind of system also creates human needs. When you mentioned, for example, last time about having kids is one way of having an investment in the future. So it's contradictory when you have a climate crisis clearly happening and coming towards you. You don't want to have children anymore because you are sure you can't offer to them any better world. It's more like dystopian world that you can imagine further. But like just having kids also really engages you into wanting to create that better future for them. That's what I think we call investment in the future, like really needing the future to exist because you really care about your children, for example. So I remember a friend making this research, trying to create a scale of analyzing if states are preparing for future generations. And one of the questions was like, if I will give you 100 lei or 100 euros today, you can take it. But if I tell you that in 1 year I will give you 120, would you wait? And the very Romanian side of me, I was like, no, I will take it clearly today. I will just take it and I will use it. And he was keep insisting, like, you will get more if you wait, and really thinking long term, you know? And I was like, no, but I don't trust the state they will give me in 1 year 120 euros or how much. And I don't trust the state. I don't trust the promise. So I can't project myself into that future that you are promising me to. And he was keep insisting, but we are in a fantastic, like, I don't know, in a research-based scenario. Just trust me when I'm telling you it's a real thing. You will get 120. Will you wait? I was saying, like, you don't understand. I'm Romanian. I'm for sure I will take it today. And we had this back and forth for a while until he got angry. Understandably, because he wanted to make a point of, like, how do you actually think about the future? And I think capitalism, with its really constant present and constant crisis and so on, really creates also selves and this human need to be today at least better.
Yeah.
Keep going, resisting and surviving, than actually really thinking about a very long future. If I don't feel today in power to have a role into the social organism, as I really like to imagine my role into the universe, it's really hard to imagine that you will have it in 10 years. So I think it's something here also about how capitalism actually comes into your life at a really personal level.
This is kind of like what Roman Krznaric was talking about with his example with the marshmallow brain and the acorn brain. Do you know the marshmallow test? Some kind of experiment. Children were given the choice of getting a marshmallow now or 2 marshmallows later or something like that. And some of them chose one thing and some of the others chose the other thing. And it was sort of influenced also by their socioeconomic standing. The upper middle class or like the middle class children could trust the future a little bit more than the rest of the children. And then we have the acorn brain, which is just really trying to switch into squirrel mode, right? Thinking about the forest. And that's the hard thing to do, like you were saying, Ani, with also the climate crisis and capitalism being so booming over our heads. I was thinking of the fact that I know so many people that just don't think they will get to the age of pension, or that there will be a state to give them pension, or that they will have any pension when they will get to that age, if they get to that age. That's not a very far future. It's just like 40 years or something. It's not 200 years.
You say that that's not a very long time, but also the time scale that we now understand that is associated with irreversible and wide-scale catastrophic climate change is also a few decades, in the sense that many of the tipping points will probably be triggered within this time. Maybe we will not see the full effects, right, in 40 years. This doesn't seem like a very long future, but it is the time scale associated with large-scale climate change. So in a way, I'm also thinking about working and giving money to the state so that you will have a pension when you are old. Is that really thinking about the future? This is paradoxical maybe, but that is also in a way projecting the present into the future, assuming that nothing will change. Whereas if you don't do revolutionary change in the next few years, then that future will not exist. So it's actually not thinking about the future. It's a kind of magical thinking. It's not an investment in the future, it's a magical thinking that the future will be there in the same way that it is in the present. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not encouraging people to stop paying their social contributions, but I'm asking about, what does that say about the way we think about the future? I don't have an answer about it, but I am thinking about it more and more. Like, I'm also trying to organize and push for change now, but if it's not happening, that I'm also trying to think about what that future will mean for us. Maybe at the end of our lives, instead of being comfortable in a house or an old people home or whatever, and getting a pension, we'll actually be foraging in the forest of the world somewhere, because the states will not exist. It's maybe unlikely, but it's not an impossible future on the trajectory that we are going.
It's the classic Robbie Doom.
Oh no, that was not the plan.
Maybe we can continue a conversation from what's our investment in our future. How do you position in to this conversation, and maybe give some ideas of how else or what motivates us despite the doom?
I wasn't thinking about it in terms of doom. For me, it's also at the same time as I'm trying to also organize and get other people to organize to change things now. At the same time, I'm also learning how to forage and identify plants and how to conserve food by fermenting and stuff like that, because it might be very useful in the future. To me, that's a way of planning for a future with climate collapse. Knowing how to recognize some kind of edible perennial plants in the forest might be the way that we manage to keep our communities together post-collapse, if that happens.
When we were preparing for this episode, and actually it started a bit with a conversation about kids, and I personally don't want kids, and I was like, what's my investment in the future? Because I was thinking something similar has to be at the same level of like procreating in a way or another. And since I'm little, I really say about that fact that if I will ever be in the position to actually taking care of a child, I would like to adopt. But I was thinking, what's my investment in the future then? Do I have an investment in the future? And I thought about like future in like many generations, really thinking, yes, of course, like learning plants and as you said, Robbie, of like how to conserve it and so on. It is an investment in the future, but somehow in my mind, I was thinking about even longer time than actually just me learning things, me and my comrades, of course. And I was thinking about generation to come. And I was like, do I actually think about like 200 years from now? And I do think about it. I thought about how I grew up. I developed this really strong need to understand my role in the social organism, taking the responsibility of what am I doing in my social surroundings, in the environment I am in. And I keep coming back to that Romanian saying, lasă peste tot pe unde mergi loc de bună ziua. Everywhere you go, leave behind a place to say good day or hello. It's a rough translation, but practically it says, if you walk through life, just do good in a way. And that's an investment of me into my life. Like, I really want to create structures and life around me that is more fulfilling for every species that surrounds me. And that's a way to live, actually. It's not only like a project that I'm taking as an investment, because like investments also sounds like banky, capitalist way of putting it. For me, it's not a project that I'm taking value out of. It's a project in which I give value in order to create more value than extract. I think this is like the guiding thought that I have. And yeah, I really hope that in this way, I will be a better ancestor, even if probably an anonymous one.
That's nice to think about. I think for me, because ever since I was little, I wanted to be a storyteller. I sort of always imagined that, something will remain after I die, and that would be my stories. So stories are really important for me. And I think they can guide us in imagining the future, and they do a lot, which we'll get to. But the other thing that I am doing and that I hope will remain after I die is the trees that I am planting. And even if they currently are in my garden, but afterwards, who knows what will happen, because I also do not plan to have children. So I am seeing in the gardens of my neighbors They are often cutting the trees. I don't know why they are doing this, but the trees are just disappearing. And we are trying to plant more trees, at least fruit trees, that can fit in the space that we have. And I have to, believe that they will not die in the next 2 to 3 to 4 years, which is not a long time, I know, but some of them can only give fruit after 5 years or more. Before doing this, and with the realization of the climate crisis, I was sort of dreading even next year. Like, next year will be worse. This is what I'm thinking. Next year will be worse. But having this closeness to trees, which you can have even if you did not plant them, is sort of creating a hope for the future, because you can always hope that, next year they will bloom again. And even after you die, they might bloom again, or their seeds will birth new trees. And maybe these trees will bloom at some point.
I really love this example of trees as living beings for whom you are an ancestor, right? And who are also family for you in a way, right? I think about this example of trees in relation maybe to the Palestinian struggle. Sometimes when I talk with someone and they say that this idea of right to return has no meaning now because all the houses are bulldozed down and the villages don't exist anymore. And I always say that, okay, but the olive trees that were planted by someone's grandparents or great grandparents, right? If they weren't burned down, they are still there, because olive trees can live for 1,000 years, I think. So yeah, I think that's a great example with the trees. I think for myself, I don't know if I want children, I don't want children. And when I say to have children, adoption is the same thing. But I also think in the same way about community. So if you have a community with good, strong ties, a community in which you feel like family to each other, then you do have a stake in the future. You want the future to be livable for the people in that community. Maybe for myself, I can think if the planet warms so much that we'll have like a huge heat wave every year, I'll be maybe fine. I'll have air conditioning. Maybe I can commute to working from home and always keeping the air conditioning on, right? But some of my friends work, in construction or agriculture, where you are out in the field all day, and their livelihoods will be impossible maybe in that future. Or projecting even further in the future, maybe this place will become unlivable. I can just buy a plane ticket and move to Norway maybe or somewhere. But many of the members of this community might be poor or homeless or have several children, and they just do not have the financial means to move, or they will be not accepted as citizens of another country, right? Because that's also a thing. So yeah, I think for me also, like having a community, if I have people that I care about, then I want to make sure that that future will be here and livable in the future also.
Yeah, that's really important. And it goes back to the ties we have with the beings around us. It also makes me think back about Angela's Balzano's quest, to make kin beyond this one species, and going back to the philosopher Donna Haraway, who had this motto, make kin, not babies. Both of them really problematize what is it with this desire to reproduce ourselves biologically, which is really complicated. It's a big discussion. But the point is that sometimes this desire is also used by the far right to have these natalist policies in certain countries in which, some babies are wanted and some other children or babies are definitely not wanted. So it's really important to think, who are we giving our care to? Who are we giving our time to? And who are we imagining this future with? What is this future going to be like, and who is it going to sustain? And is it just going to create, like you said, Robbie, with the present? Do we just imagine it like more of the same and just reproducing people who look exactly like us? And in this case, it would also mean that it's just pushing away everybody that is different. And in many cases, this is people of color. And this is, what is happening with white supremacy and with refugees being thrown out or pushed away or let to drown. So how are we working towards futures that are not like this? How are we expanding these community ties? This is one of the questions that I think we can sort of cling to in our lives. Yeah, it's interesting, I think, that all of us have this relationship towards children, as it not wanting necessarily to have biological children. Raising a child is obviously extremely difficult. You need a village, like they say. And if you are somehow stuck in the nuclear family, like capitalism wants you to be, I think it's really, really hard to do activism and organizing and raise a child. So I think I read somewhere that there is actually this counter thing happening, that people who are involved in activist work, then they cannot be anymore. And certainly they cannot take riskier actions, right? And this is a question that we have to consider in general, because also if we have other people in our care that are not necessarily our children, then again, we cannot take riskier actions. So, bringing about the revolution and having a community and caring for everyone around us, it's not easy.
Yeah, it's exhausting.
I think this is more difficult also in more Western individualistic contexts, because people do have communities where the resistance is and where the survival is. I feel like people are more willing to engage collectively with the struggle. It's more like, I don't think that that's the place to put the pressure. Like fighting for another world and survival, it's very difficult to go together.
I was thinking of our communities in Romania, but there are places in which people are managing to resist precisely because of their communities. Yes.
Capitalism also alienates us in like thinking that you are alone with this struggle, and then you just think about your future of your own, like buy your own apartment or like take your own bank loans and so on.
Maybe it's not like very long term, but it is a kind of long term thinking, because building relationships that can sustain pressure, building relationships with people that you can trust and you can organize with, this doesn't just happen like in 2 days or like tomorrow. It is, in a way, really trying to be patient and put your time and your attention towards something that might take a while to flourish.
Like a tree that waits the other spring.
Yeah, and I completely agree that investing in building relationships is planning for the future. Creating conflict resolution skills or doing transformative justice stuff, it takes a lot of time to learn the skills. It also takes time as a process. It maybe doesn't work from the beginning, right? And so it's a lot of effort for something that might not pay off. But I think it's in this way an investment in the future. You're learning skills that grow strong communities, and that's the way that community will also have a future, not just a present. And another thing that I was thinking about, to me, when I talk about doing stuff in a way that is also planning for the future, is not like, some of our parents have this saying, at least in Romania, that I will endure and refuse myself things that would make my life comfortable so that my children can have a good future. To me, I'm not thinking about refusing myself stuff or waiting a long time so that we get a payment or, things happen in the future. To me, it's about being intentional about the way we do things and choosing ways and actions and paths that are compatible and help grow this idea of a certain kind of future, as opposed to destroying the future, right? Choosing to burn fossil fuels now is a path that makes my life comfortable now, but it destroys the future, the possibility for a future. Of course, we don't want people to buy more blankets and just put on more layers of clothes in the winter instead of burning gas, right? What we want is people to think about the future and with this idea, try to buy alternative ways of heating, either electrical heaters, and also organize and push for the state to introduce laws that help people eliminate fossil fuels from their lives, right? Because we don't want to focus on individual choices. But that's the way I think about it, how to do things in the present that also are generative for the future as opposed to destructive. The squirrel, when he or she buries the nuts in the ground, it's thinking about its own well-being for the winter, right? It's not thinking about the future forest. But it is doing that in a way that's also generative. It creates a forest in the future. I think that's the way I see it. This is a point also to be made about activist circles. This is a personal reflection. I'm not sure if it's a correct analysis, but like this is how I've been thinking about it. That sometimes in anarchist circles, in a way, I think also there's not this kind of investment in the future. It's more like building the present in a way that's sustainable in a way, but it's also just a projection of the present into the future. There's this great book of which I don't remember the author now. It's called The Art of Failure. And it says how in queer culture, to in a way resist this kind of heteronormative worldview, queer people often refuse having a traditional family, having kids, trying to achieve some milestones in life at the age, at which heteronormative culture says you should have them, and etc., etc., etc. And the author calls this a kind of failure, an intentional failure to adhere to this worldview. And I think, in a way, anarchist circles are also, in some way, often, reproduce this dynamic of the art of failure, of refusing a certain heteronormative way of doing things and a certain heteronormative temporality by just refusing to have a vision of the future, like a serious vision of the future, not just some kind of vague utopia that we are not actually working towards. And the counter to this kind of worldview, I think, is a kind of crip temporality, of which I read about in this book, Feminist Queer Crip. It's a very great book, of which I also don't remember the author now.
Alison Kafer, no?
Exactly, Alison Kafer.
And The Queer Art of Failure by Jack Halberstam.
Exactly, thank you. Alison Kafer says that for disabled people, often society excludes them from achieving these milestones or having this kind of life. And then a kind of crip temporality is not refusing this completely, but giving them different meaning and achieving them in different ways, in a different time scale, etc., in different forms. It's not necessarily refusing it. And I think this is what I would like to see also in anarchist circles, thinking about these things in a crip temporality. How to organize collectively childcare, or how to take care of each other when we are old. Are we going to have some kind of pension system, or really thinking about it? How are we going to live? We are going to pass through different phases of our lives and our needs change. And those are really big organizational, maybe even institutional, things that we need to put into place that need a lot of planning and a lot of building. It needs planning with a vision of the future, not just answering to a need when it arises. That utopia that we are working toward is an actually existing society in time and space sometime. And that also means that we need to consider the ecological collapse that will happen. We are either doing the revolution now, or we need to plan for, society post-collapse. Those are kind of the options, but we need to engage seriously with these.
To start concluding this conversation, I also want to recommend to the listener some readings if they're interested in them. One book that really shattered my sense of reality about the climate crisis was The Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler. So Octavia Butler is this really visionary Black feminist writer of science fiction. And she paved the way. She was writing science fiction as a Black woman when there was very little examples for her of Black women doing this, or none. So she was doing an amazing job of paving the way for future writers. And she wrote this book, Parable of the Sower, that has been talked about a lot in the last years, especially with the re-election of Donald Trump, because it is very prescient, right? So it's almost like it predicted the future that the United States is now, because in Parable of the Sower, you have this unstable economical and ecological climate, and you have growing wealth inequality, and you have these little towns in which people live, and then outside it's a complete disaster. And the United States is really worryingly starting to look like the reality from the Parable of the Sower. So it's a grim book. It's not necessarily hopeful, though it does contain hope. And there's also a sequel to it. So at least you can go towards it and see that there can be change even after destruction. So there is still something to do.
Or during the crisis, I feel like the change is happening while things are also changing. I also read the Octavia Butler's novel. I don't see it so grim, maybe because grim is all around us anyway, so it's not a shocking idea. But what I really took from it, besides the hope that, as you mentioned, it is in it, it's a way to look at the world and navigate it through the crisis, beyond the crisis. So kind of like looking further in the future, looking at something beyond what is going on now, because this will change anyway. So because the change is constant, we have to like flow with it in the direction of the change we want. And I really liked, again, the self that it creates. It's really inspiring for me to take a way of navigating also as an individual, not only as a collective or worldview. So I also recommend it with all my heart.
And I also recommend it.
Yeah, I mean, Octavia Butler is really an amazing science fiction writer. And I think this is what we've been thinking, long-term thinking, right? Or imagining the future. This is what really good science fiction does. It's not supposed to predict the future. It is supposed to have a vision of the future based on the present, in a way sort of interpreting the present, the what if. It's not supposed to happen. I don't think she was like, I'm predicting it. But she was seeing patterns that unfortunately did not change and led to the current moment. I also want to leave you with some positive climate fiction stories, and you can find those on the GRIST website. They have a project called Imagine 2200. So writers are supposed to imagine what will the world look like with a positive vision in 2200. And they have really beautiful illustrations. They are short stories, and they usually contain like a very specific, localized vision of a certain either community or climate solution that worked. So they are really nice to read when you feel down, most of them. So I recommend that as well. A quick shout out to the squirrels here and an apology from us. It seems like they don't actually forget 80% of the nuts they buried. That actually makes sense because evolutionarily it would have been way too much work, right? So this info probably got famous with Sarah Silverman's joke that squirrels forget where they bury so many of their nuts that it explains how trees are planted. Well, turns out the reverse is actually true. Squirrels retrieve 70 to 95% of what they hide. That's impressive because some of them store thousands of seeds apparently. And not only do they know where they hide their own, but they also keep track of the hiding places of others. They are amazing at retrieval timing too, because they know white oak trees sprout quickly, so they prioritize eating those acorns before the slower germinating red oak acorns. That's some knowledge. So some of them will actually go as far as stealing acorns from others. Yes. But luckily, squirrels seem to not be very revengeful. And those unretrieved seeds, well, it's unclear if they are really completely forgotten or just abandoned because there's easier food to find. So, sorry squirrels, first of all. And for us humans, worry not. We'll still have a lot to learn from them. Dr. Noah Perlou, a professor at the University of New England School of Marines and Environmental Program, says, "Gray squirrels spend an incredible amount of time not foraging. They're resting, watching, socializing. That just shows how effective that must be at stashing and stealing, to be able to do that and to not have to be busy all day long." So, may we learn how not to be busy from them, how to forgive when we are tricked, and how to leave behind forests, even accidentally. Thank you for listening to some of our thoughts on the future. I hope you can also share with your friends what are your hopes and investments and imaginations of the future, and you can also write us in the comment section because we're curious to hear.
This podcast is autonomously organized. You can support us on Patreon if you have like $1 extra in your pocket today.
Today's offering is an exercise for us and for you that is called Letters from the Future. Elizabeth from the episode on climate grief suggested it, and I really kept it in mind because I really wanted us to do it at some point, and I thought this is the perfect episode to do it. This exercise actually comes from Joanna Macy from Work That Reconnects.
Before we begin, we want to acknowledge with gratitude the life and work of Joanna Macy, who passed away last year in July, leaving us an extraordinary body of teachings, practices, and courage. She dedicated her life to deep ecology, not as an abstract philosophy, but as a lived, relational way of being with the earth and with one another. Her work reminds us that our pain for the world is not a weakness, but a sign of our belonging. In that spirit, honest, spacious, and fiercely compassionate, we enter this exercise carrying forward the legacy she so generously offered.
So again, you can also find this exercise in the book Coming Back to Life by Joanna Macy and Molly Brown. And I recommend, if you want to do it, to get a pen and a paper, or write on your phone's app or wherever you want, on a leaf, I don't know. The idea is that you are thinking about the far future, maybe 200 years from now. You are mentally traveling to that place and you are imagining a human. You don't need to know a lot about them, but you are imagining a human that lives 200 years from now. Imagine what would they say to you. The idea is that you really open your mind and you listen to their words and then you put them on paper. So this is their future letter that they are writing to you. You can stop this right now and give yourself 15 minutes or 20 minutes if you have them, or you can just think about it throughout the day and write it later. But just stay with this for a while and let it feel in your body. We also did this exercise, and I want to invite Annie to read the letter.
Dear Annie, I'm writing to you from the year 2126, 100 years from where you stand. It has become hard to describe the world I'm writing to you from, as it is almost impossible for me to truly imagine the world you still have. You know when you used to joke in Iceland about them cutting down all their trees in the 1500s to warm their houses before realizing they were living on hot water? The whole world followed, without really tapping into the capacity of the sun. So immersed in the economic system of constant growth and profit and its inescapable feeling of alienation, your world stopped dreaming big, really, and just cut down the trees, and just drove those cars, hit those guns, and just chatted with AI and just fed the few, ignored the pain. And you know what else I know? That feeling of powerlessness and the dissociated care for the surroundings your people sowed for generations. In my world, they are the hardest things to uproot. Some of us run freely through the patches of grass, but only in our sleep when we happen to dream about it. There is little saved for my generation from your time, though you can still see the spots of resistance you managed to ignite. You see it in the way some parts of the globe now create their songs. We sing about you. You can feel it in the movements some of our dances represent. You can see where collective care and new systems started to feed the earth more than greed. There, you can see some insects reappearing. Anyway, you don't need me to tell you. You know that your earth is dying. All I ask is that you be bold, courageous, and together for the whole, because each little resistant creative action might mean a few more insects and a few more plants, and trees maybe, and outside walks in my world today. Hugs from the future, Kaya.
Thank you, Annie. I'm trying to stabilize my emotions. So I did this exercise as well a few weeks ago, and I wrote it on paper, so I hope I can understand my handwriting. And also, I remember when I was thinking what to write or trying to tap into this imaginary future human. Well, some future human will definitely exist, not this one, but they are real. It made me tear up. So when I was writing, to be able to write the letter, I was trying to create some distance between this imaginary human and me. So I don't know if I did the exercise right, but I will read it. First of all, it's not your fault. This future, my present, is not on your shoulders alone. I know you might think it is, for that is why you are listening for my voice. I know you have been, worried and alive, you have felt, small and hopeless. I know anger has burned in you and grief has flooded. All that has passed now, a long time ago. The trees you loved, even the sky you looked at, nothing is the same. Yet the world is still ravishingly beautiful. Just as you were breathless at first snow, so I am when the rains come. Thankful. My heart still has 4 chambers like yours did, and my lungs breathe this air that connects us all, plants, animals, soil, water. How much can you change of what will come? The days seem short because time is running out. But they're not. They are your life. I want you to live a good life. Whatever harm you do to the world, don't double it down with guilt. Answer for your life with your life. With the magic it can bring when you breathe in tandem with the rest of nature. The future is not on your shoulders, the present is in your palms, and your palms are for holding and fighting and caring, and for pleasure too, for crafting a path away from destruction. You hold your mortar and brick, and then let your shoulders rest. Breathe. And second of all, thank you.
Dear great non-biological grandfather / grandmother, I don't know so much about you. I wonder how your life looked. I'm just writing to you to tell you how my life is and how the world looks now. I read somewhere that a giant forest called the Amazon used to be where now we have vast expanses of grass. I haven't seen the Great Barrier Reef, and my children will never get to see it. However, polar bears were discovered on a small island, and we were surprised that they managed to survive. We've relocated them to Antarctica, and while they are confused, their population is starting to bounce back. And the other great forests of the tropics in Africa and Indonesia survived. We didn't have to move, although our lives look radically different now than yours did, I think. We have huge, sprawling, patchy, sparse cities intermingled with the forest. Our house is full of solar panels and vegetables, and my children can walk to school and see wild animals every day. I imagine how strange this must be for you, but I do think you imagined some of it. I am just writing to say that I am grateful for the small part you did, that you tried to do something so that our world now exists and humans can live in it, and there still are birds and starfish and corals and forests. And I know you didn't do much alone, but it mattered, and we are grateful. With love, Abra.
It's very beautiful, Robbie, and thank you for saying it on the spot. That was amazing.
Ding 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 ding.
If you would like to support our work, you can do that by interacting with and sharing episodes on social media and subscribing to our YouTube channel. And if you would also like to help us financially, you can do that by subscribing to our Patreon or with a one-time donation to Ko-fi. As you know, in recent years there has been quite serious legal crackdown on climate activism in Europe in general, and also growth of the far right in many countries, which are very fossil fuel oriented. It's becoming harder and harder to do climate activism, especially in places where the movement is very small and hasn't reached the critical mass. With that in mind, we imagine this project also as a redistributive project. As we said, the members of this collective are involved in the climate movement in Romania in one way or the other. So the earnings from this project will go first of all to provide a part-time income for some of the members of the pod, which will allow us to do more work and take more rest in organizing. And After a certain threshold, we both like to redistribute this money to climate groups and individuals doing important work on climate change in Romania and the Balkans and Eastern Europe, and even supporting us with a $2 subscription in this effort would mean a lot to us. Thank you very much for listening and hope to hear you later and see you on Patreon.